Okay, Erev Tov, we're in Mesillas Yeshorim, chapter 22, Perek Chav, and that starts us a new subject. Ve'veir midas hanava, the attribute of humility. This is, we'd say, the seventh subject that he's talking about. We had from the beginning Zirus, Rizus, Nikios, Precious, Tara, Chasidus, and now Hanava. Some divide the Sefer into three parts. If that's so this is like the beginning of the third section, the third of the third. Hanava, humility. He himself refers us to earlier in the Sefer, where we spoke about this already. The subject of arrogance and humility has been spoken about earlier, and he himself in the opening statement is going to refer us to where it was spoken about earlier. We spoke earlier about the degradation of arrogance, and it can be derived from there the praiseworthiness of humility. Now we're going to explain mainly what humility is, and you'll automatically understand what arrogance is from this flip side. So just to back, he refers us to Perek Yud Aleph, that's talking about Nikios, where he spoke about how a person has to perfect all of his actions as far as mitzvahs go, and also midos, character traits. And over there he brought a list of about 4 or 5 midos that he wanted to use as examples, mostly because those are the main ones that people stumble in. And the first one that he picked to explain was arrogance, gava. So just in order to get a preface into the subject we're going to talk about now, so I think it will be recommended to refer back and at least recap what we learned over there as far as gava. So in general, he says that all the bad midos are ros ba'atzman, ros b'toldos, and that they're inherently wrong, and also the consequences that they cause are also evil, both the actual inherent midah and also the toladot. So when he spoke about gaiva, in general, he said, to sum it up, he said that a person doesn't see himself as he really is. If you'd ask an arrogant person to describe himself, you wouldn't get an accurate picture. There are two extremes. There's the arrogant person and there's a humble person. And in this Sefer we see that just because a person has overcome his arrogance, it doesn't mean that he's humble. There's a lot of gray space in between. There's a no man's land. It means that a person could be out of the realm of being arrogant, but he still didn't become humble. To be arrogant is considered a to'eva, it's considered an abomination, to'avas Hashem kol gvalev, and that's an avera, that's considered an avera for any level. It means everybody has to get rid of arrogance. If he didn't get rid of arrogance, he's not a nucky, he hasn't succeeded in cleansing himself of evil. It's evil to be arrogant. When a person has overcome that, and he's not arrogant anymore, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's humble. Because here in the Sefer we see that there's in between becoming a nucky, there's been Precious and Tara and Chasidus, which are very big subjects for very noble people, and not everybody can do it. He says right away by Precious, by abstinence, he already said that's not for everybody, it's only for a small elite group of Chachamim that could reach that level of abstinence. And then he goes on to Tara, purity of motivations, and then Chasidus, the piety that we spent many months on already, and now he comes to humility. So obviously we see that just because a person is not arrogant doesn't mean that he has become humble. So that's now a study to figure out what is considered arrogance, and that a person has to overcome that. He should be out of the class that's called arrogant, and then even though he's not arrogant, he's still not humble, and then we're going to have to find what are the ingredients that a person should be considered humble. And that's this level over here that we're learning now about humility. So, as we started saying, the issue of arrogance is l'chora, according to what he says over there, that a person doesn't see himself accurately. Either he makes his qualities more than they really are, or he ignores his faults and his deficiencies. He doesn't see himself as is. He acts as if he's something that he's not really. And he gave a few examples over there to explain how even though the shoresh, the root of all this, is the same, that a person doesn't see himself correctly, the consequences, the ramifications, the expression of how each person is going to express that feeling could be different. It could even be opposites. One person, because he thinks he's so great, is going to act in a haughty manner and not speak to people, and or he'll be very angry at people, anger sometimes could be a root of the problem. Sometimes it's not a root, sometimes it's just a symptom of a person who's really arrogant. And also a person sometimes might, on the contrary, he might act very humble because he thinks that he's such a great person, he should act in a humble way. Or a person that doesn't even give expression at all, just that he doesn't consider other people's opinions. All those are expressions of a person who thinks of himself what he's not really. L'chora, once a person sees himself accurately, he's able to figuratively look in the mirror and see himself as he really is, so he's really not arrogant. But that does not yet make him to be a humble person. And now we're going to embark on the issue of becoming a humble person. And he's already, a long time has gone out of arrogance already. He's already after Nikios. Now he's Prishus, Tara, Chasidus, and now it seems that it's a very high level, because he doesn't expect you right after Nikios to jump on to working on, now that you're not arrogant, to start becoming humble. He doesn't expect us to, he doesn't even expect us to go at such a pace. Prishus, Tara, Chasidus, abstinence, purity of motivation, and then piety. Now he's rising on the ladder to go on to humility. So you see, just from the order, that it's a very high level. And he himself, over there, Nikias, he also referred us to here at the end of Gaiva. He said that you see that it's such a great quality that Pinchas Ben Yair put it towards the end of the list. So here we are towards the end of the list, and we're embarking on the next rung of humility. In general, we would say that humility is that a person does not consider himself for any reason. He doesn't consider himself chashuv. We'll see what that means. We have to glean as we go through. We'll be gleaning some different points, and we'll try to collect them as we go along, to see what are the points that will make a person humble. This is the exact opposite of arrogance. Arrogance is that he's machshav himself very much. He considers himself very praiseworthy. And here, the humble person, even though he knows that he's a great person, he's not going to consider himself great. Now there's a mistake that I'd like to preempt before we start, that people think that a humble person, he doesn't think that he has qualities. He doesn't think that he has qualities. The reason why he's humble is because he says, what am I? I have no qualities. That's not a humble person. And just to prove it, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote in the Torah, B'chol beisi ne'amanu. Hashem told him to write it, that he is the most loyal person in Hashem's, whatever you want to call the word, beisi. B'chol beisi ne'amanu. In my whole household, he is the one who is most ne'aman, most trustworthy.
Can we turn down the
yes, yeah.
coal?
Yeah,
yes. If we can, I have to read.
Yes, sure. So when Moshe Rabbeinu wrote B'chol beisi ne'amanu, so that he had to surely believe what he wrote. If he wouldn't believe it, he wouldn't be believing in Torah's Moshe. So surely Moshe Rabbeinu knew that everything that it says in the Torah is true. And not only that, when it says that Ish Moshe Anav Ma'od Mikol Ha'adam Asher Al Pnei Ha'adama, that Moshe is the most humble of anyone that is on earth, so he had to believe that also. Hashem told Moshe to write that Moshe is the most humble person. So now we see a chiddush. Not only that a person knows that he's great, he has great qualities, he even would be that if he's humble, he'd know that he's humble also. People would see that as a self-contradictory, that a person would know that he's most humble. But in the Torah, it's open that Moshe Rabbeinu knew that he's the most humble person. Is that true? Everybody agrees to that? Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it. And Hashem told him to write it. Then if he had to believe it, or else he's kofar b'Toras Moshe. So he knew that he's the most humble person. You find a similar thing in the Gemara. The Gemara at the end of Sota talks about Anava, Mishameis Rebbe Batla Anava, after Rebbe died. So there was no more humility. And one of the Avrohom says, no, that's a mistake because I'm still here. That means that I'm an Anav. I am humble. So is it possible for a person to know that he's humble? And it's possible for him to know that he's the most humble. So it's open in the Torah and also in the Mishnah that yes, a person could know that he's great, and he'll still be humble. In fact, he could be the most humble person, and he could even know that he's the most humble person, and he could even say it if there's a reason to say it. Oh, it's not, a person wouldn't go around saying its qualities for no reason, but if he has a reason to say it, as it was the case of Moshe Rabbeinu or the Gemara, that there was a Mishnah that said that humility is over, and he had a reason to say that's not true because I still exist. So there's still a humble person around. So we have to get to the bottom of this. What is humility? But we did find something already. We did progress to find out that it does not mean that a person doesn't think he has qualities. He knows his qualities and still he's going to be humble. And he might even know that he has more qualities than everybody else. Moshe Rabbeinu knows that he's the greatest person on earth, and he happens to be also the most humble person. So what might seem to us as a contradiction, we see that it's not. So now, hopefully, as we go on to find out what humility is, we'll be able to solve this riddle, that a person can know that he's the greatest and still that he's humble. Told us, told us the results, the consequences that follow from this yesod, from this foundation, that a person doesn't consider himself worthy, will be the opposite of the consequences and the effects that are brought about by gaiva. A person who's a bal gaiva, a person who's arrogant. So before, in Perikid Aleph, he gave all kinds of examples how the expression of that comes out, of how he acts. There are going to be expressions of the anava also. And we're going to learn about it. We're going to learn about the toladot, the expressions of a person who considers himself humble. If we analyze the subject, we'll find that anava, humility, is dependent on thought and also actions. There are thoughts of humility and there are actions of humility. That might be what he talks about when he says toladot. One line up, he said that there are toladot, there are results, there are consequences to a person's attitude of being humble. Those consequences are going to be the chorah, that's what he's referring to, that the maasim, the actions that a person does because he's humble, those are the toladot, those are the consequences that he's referring to. There's the shoresh, the root is going to be his attitude, what he thinks about himself, and the toladot are going to be the consequences, how he's going to act because he feels that way. And he warns us, these two subjects of machshava and maaseh, the thoughts and the actions, it has to be in that order. The person first has to be an anav in his thoughts, has to be humble in his thoughts, and then he should act in the way of the humble. Because if he's going to act in the way of the humble and he doesn't have the thoughts of humility, so he's not really humble. And on the contrary, he's acting in a way that's contrary to what he thinks about himself, and he's just becoming more and more arrogant because he says, I'm also humble. That's on the list of his qualities. He's very smart, he's very rich, he's very powerful, he's very humble. It becomes part of his list of arrogance. So he says that a person should not work. We'll see about later on, there might be some contradiction to this, but initially he says that a person should not work on being humble in action before he's humble in thought. So the issue of anava, right away he gave about 5 lines to explain what anava is, and now he goes into the halakim. As we've gone through the sefer, we've seen that always he says bir hamida, what the issue is going to be about, and then he divides it into its parts, chelkei hamida, and then how to acquire it and how to watch out for its to guard it from its interferences, impediments. So here in this parak he combines 2 subjects together. One is Bir Hamida and Chelkei Hamida, because right now we're starting the Chelkei Hamida, that the Machshava and Maisa are the Chalakim, those are the parts of humility that's divided into 2 parts. One is the thoughts and one is the actions. First the person has to be humble in his thoughts, and then he could be humble in his actions. If he's not going to be humble in his thoughts and he's going to want to be humble in his actions, then he's one of those imaginary humble people that are not humble at all. The Avrohom, we mentioned when he spoke about in Perikid Aleph about the Balei Gaiva, on the contrary, he spoke about arrogant people. So he gave an example, a person who's arrogant about his humility, and he acts humble because he's so arrogant. So if a person is going to act on being humble outwardly and not inwardly, so it's just going to add on fuel to his arrogance. Those are like imposters. A tzavua is a person, the word tzavua probably comes from the word colored, like he's imposter. He's painting himself on the outside, and inside he still is what he was the whole time. Yes?
How do you pick these people in the crowd? The person who acts very humble but in his thought very arrogant, and versus the other way around?
What's the question? How would we be able to
pick these people in the crowd?
How would we be able to notice it?
Yeah.
So even if it wouldn't be discernible, it wouldn't change the facts that this person is really humble, this person is really arrogant. But the Mesillas did tell us earlier that the person who is inwardly arrogant, it's going to come out sometimes. Even if he'll be able to hide his thoughts 90% of the time, but it's going to come out sometimes, and we'll see what really is inside. He gives an example over there of a house based on a medrash. The medrash is not talking about arrogance, but he uses it as a mashal, that if there's a room that's full with straw, but you don't know what's inside, But then there's certain cracks here and there. And when it's full of straws, so then it's going to start peeking out. So you're going to know that that's what the house is full of. So the same thing, a person who's full of arrogance, even though he's trying to put on a show and gives himself a front of humility, you'll find here and there are cracks in his front, and it'll come out. So it is possible to discern. But here the subject is that a person is working on himself. He's not trying to find which person is the arrogant person, which person is the humble person. So on his own, he has to know that if he's really humble or is really arrogant. So in the order of how a person is supposed to work on the subject of humility, he says it's necessary first that a person should become inwardly humble, and then he should work also on the outward characteristic of a humble person. There is importance to being humble outwardly also. He doesn't negate the whole issue. He's going to even tell us, to specify, he's going to tell us there are 4 categories of anvas hamaisa. Once we're going to get to the subject of the outward expression of humility, he's going to give us quite a detailed list of what's expected of a person, how we should act humbly. But now he's just warning us that it shouldn't be that he's just working on the outward humility, because it's just going to make him into a bigger, arrogant person. He has to first inwardly become truly humble. So that's what he says over here, that he first has to become a humble person in his thoughts and then act humbly. Because if he's not going to be humble in his thoughts and want to be humble in his actions, he's just going to be an imposter, which is worse. He says there's nothing worse than that. A pretty strong statement. Asher ein ba'olam ra'ameham. There's nothing in the world that's worse than them. A person who's who is a faker. He's an imposter. The Gemara says this. It probably is referring to a Gemara that says, "Osim ma'aseh zimri mevakshim schar kapinchas." That over there, the Gemara talks about somebody that warned his family, "Don't be scared of those that are really tzaddikim. Don't be scared of those people that are really rishoyim. But be scared of those that act as tzaddikim and they're really wicked inside. Those are the most dangerous people. If he's wicked through and through, and we know about him, so we could protect ourselves from him. If he's righteous, wonderful. But a person who is outwardly righteous and inwardly wicked, that's the person to stay away from." So that's probably what he's referring to when he says there's nothing worse than an imposter. Therefore, he's going to first explain anava b'machshava, and then afterwards, about 2 pages down, probably take us like 2 weeks to get there, he's going to talk about anvas hamaisa. First talk about humility in thought, and then he's going to talk about humility in action. And now comes the subject of humility in thought. We mentioned earlier, just to as we start off now, that back in Nikios, he said that if a person doesn't see himself as he really is, he makes his qualities bigger than they really are, or he ignores his chesronis, he makes his faults less than they are, that's l'chorah going to be the result of that is going to be an arrogant person. And now we're going on, even if a person doesn't do that, we want to continue that a person should become humble. Ha'anava b'machshava hi, she'izbonei na'odam, v'yisam es lo, asher ein nati lo v'akavad v'uyim lo. A person has to contemplate till it becomes true to him, that he really feels so, that he's not worthy of praise and honor, and surely not superiority over other people. Why? Why is he not? Even though he has qualities. Because of his faults, and even of his accomplishments also are not worthy of praise. It's going to take time to be able to internalize this, because there's going to be big chidushim over here that we might not agree with in the beginning. But he's going to explain himself as we go on. But he says that a person has faults, and also even his qualities are not enough to be worthy of praise. Of course, we're all asking why not. A person has qualities, so why shouldn't he be worthy of praise? So we'll go on. So the words are a bit hard to understand, but it's clear from other places where the Ramchal wrote this. He means means that things that he's lacking. Also because of what he has. So it's not exactly clear what that means, but in other sefer where he quotes this, he means even the qualities that he has are also not enough reason to be praiseworthy. Now he explains. What I meant to say, that because of a person's faults or his deficiencies, that's why he's not praiseworthy. Pashatu. It's impossible for a person, no matter what level of perfection he's holding on, the most perfection that a human being can attain, but it's still impossible that he shouldn't have many faults, many deficiencies. So here we're talking about a person that has many qualities, but he has faults. And that's going to be a key to a reason why he shouldn't be arrogant. And he shouldn't feel himself praiseworthy. Here's the chiddush, just to emphasize it again, that even though he does have qualities, but since he has deficiencies, that's a reason why he's not praiseworthy. O mitzad tivo, o mitzad mishpachto krovov, o mitzad mikrim shekorulo, o mitzad masav. For a number of reasons, he has many chesronos. This is a list of the different deficiencies that a person might have. Either because of his nature, he's faulty in his nature. He has some quality in his qualities. We'll say that he doesn't. Not all of his qualities are so qualitative. He has in his teva, he has some weaknesses. He has weaknesses in his nature, or because of his family or relatives. That's also considered a stain on his perfection. The fact that he has relatives that are not on that level of perfection, or things that happen to him that are degrading to him, or because of his actions. His actions also, now nobody's perfect. There's no man on the earth that only does good and never makes a mistake. So these are the chesronos. He talks about deficiencies. But what was the question? That a person has qualities. Why is he not worthy of praise because of his qualities? He says because he has deficiencies. These are all blemishes in a person that don't allow him to feel superior. Even if he has many qualities, because these deficiencies are enough to dampen them, to darken them, to dim them. That's this one sentence here is one of the main principles of this section of Anava. The Mesillas Yeshorim is telling us a principle. Maybe we won't agree with it, or maybe eventually we'll agree with it. But he seems to say that even if a person has many qualities, the fact that he has a deficiency dampens his perfection, and therefore he's not praiseworthy, because you have to look at the whole person. In other words, till now we spoke about an arrogant person. Back in Perek Yud Aleph, by Nakios, we spoke about a person who's arrogant. An arrogant person blows himself up more than he really is, or he ignores his chesronos. He puts down, he nullifies his deficiencies as if they're not there. Here comes a new chiddush, a new novel idea. Even if he sees himself as he really is, and he sees that he has qualities and he has deficiencies, so the person who's not arrogant, but he hasn't come to this level of humility yet, so he'll say that I'm praiseworthy for my qualities. I have chesronos, but as far as my qualities, I'm still praiseworthy. Why not? Sounds good. It sounds like it's the truth. So the Mesillas Yeshorim comes with a chiddush, and he says no, that if a person has some deficiencies, he's not praiseworthy, because you don't look only at the qualities, you have to look at the whole person, and the whole person is not perfect, and therefore he has to always be conscious of his deficiencies, and he shouldn't be ignoring them. Yes?
You used the word praiseworthy. What's the word that he uses there?
Ra'ui l'tehila. Tehila is praise. Tehila, like Hallel, comes from the Shosh of Hallel. Tehila. Ra'ui l'tehila. Eina tehila v'akavod ru'im lo. The praise and honor are not fitting for him. He says the same thing, the opposite. When he spoke about arrogance, so he said that he's ra'ui l'tehila, that he's praiseworthy. And here he's saying that the humble person doesn't feel himself praiseworthy. Worthy of praise, right? Ra'ui means fitting, appropriate, fitting for praise. We're going to have to figure this. He's saying a big chiddush over here. I agree that it's a big chiddush, that a person
he should not see himself
as praiseworthy. Right. And it can't be that he's fooling himself. We're not going to tell a person that he should not see the truth. We're telling him he should see the truth. And the truth is that you have qualities, but you also have deficiencies. The fact that you're not perfect, so you can't consider yourself praiseworthy. In other words, only perfection is praiseworthy. But if something is not perfect, it doesn't mean that we're going to deny his qualities. We're not going to say he doesn't have a quality. He has a quality. But as far as praise goes, kavod, so he always would think of his 90%. He's not 100%. 90%. He's not 100%. Someone gave a mashal to explain this. Maybe it'll give some more understanding of what he's saying. Let's say they want to honor somebody at a dinner. They want to honor somebody who gave a lot of money, whatever it might be. They want to honor somebody and they're going to talk about his praises. So we understand that they're not saying that he's perfect in every way. They're just talking about his praises. Of course he has some deficiencies. But if they would mention the deficiencies, he would tell them, Yashikoyach, I don't need the dinner. Don't say my praises, don't say my deficiencies. Why not? Because at the time when we're saying his praises, we want to imagine that he's only praiseworthy. In order to give him praise, we see it by ourselves, we're also like that. That we're not just focusing on the quality alone. We are ignoring, in order to give him praise, if we would just talk about the thing that he did, the praise, but also balance it with everything else that he does, he would say, I'm not praiseworthy. Better don't do the whole thing. You didn't do me a favor.
Yeah, but I think that those dinners are supposed to be like a chizik for the community, so that people can aspire to whatever they
To the quality.
praise.
Right. So we're not saying not to make dinners. We're not saying not to praise. We're not saying not to do it. We're just saying, just as a mashal, just as an example to bring out the point. With a person who's being honored, would he rather that they should not honor him at all, rather than to say his praises and also his deficiencies? He would rather not. Usually people would rather not. Why not? Because when we're praising somebody, we're saying that the whole person in his wholesomeness, everything about him is praiseworthy. In order to give him praise, we also have, I can't Dafka explain it yet, but we also have that same feeling that a person is only praiseworthy if he's completely praiseworthy. If he has deficiencies, so then he's not praiseworthy. It's an interesting thing. It's an interesting phenomenon. Why not? We should say he shouldn't feel, we're giving him praise what he deserves. If we're going to make his praises more than he really is, so that's going to be arrogance. But we're not doing that. We're giving him praise for what he deserves. But we're also putting on the table also his deficiencies. No, I'd rather not. That means that we also realize that if a person is not perfect, he's not praiseworthy. Of course, the quality that he has is a quality, and he may recognize it, other people may recognize it, but as far as the whole person...
Okay, I think we need to clarify maybe something. He's going to make a distinction there between a person wanting praise for himself. On the other hand, he's going to strongly urge us to praise others.
Right. So that's a beautiful point.
So he's trying to explain how we should see ourselves, not
Yes.
that we should be diminishing others.
Right. And the question would be, this evokes a question. If we're saying that a person should not feel praiseworthy because he knows that he has deficiencies, so how can he offer praise to somebody else? He knows the person also has deficiencies. And there has to be a difference. There's a difference here between a person looking at himself or looking at somebody else. When he looks at himself, as far as receiving praise, he's not going to consider himself praiseworthy, but when he looks at somebody else, he is going to consider the praise for the qualities that he has. Yes?
No, I was going to answer your question, is to see everyone as if they are better than you in some way. Because of their uniqueness, there's something about them that makes them better than you.
But is that, but is that...
To praise them.
But is it necessarily, but is he perfect? He's not going to be perfect either. He's also not perfect. So he has qualities and I have qualities. So when I have qualities on myself, so you're telling me that I should not look at myself as praiseworthy because I should look at my whole being, and I know I have deficiencies. When I look at somebody else, so I'm not even talking about if he has something more than me, less than me. I want to analyze him if he's praiseworthy. And we're going to say, yes, you do have things to praise him about, and over there we're just going to study his qualities. And we're not going to talk about his deficiencies. How could we reconcile those things? How does a person look at himself? How does he look at somebody else? So we're coming to it seems that when a person is looking at somebody else, he has no business to look at his deficiencies. He knows he has deficiencies, but that's not my business. I don't have to look at everybody's deficiencies. I'm entitled to look at his qualities alone. I don't have to study his deficiencies. I don't have to assess the whole person. I'm allowed to assess the qualities that I want to study, and I have no reason to assess his deficiencies. It's not my issue. But when a person is studying himself, so he also knows that he has qualities, and if he wants to study those qualities, he may. But he can't ignore his whole being because he is himself. The fact that he's himself, so he by nature of him being himself, he sees himself as a whole. So therefore, since he knows that in his whole there are deficiencies also, he's not going to consider himself praiseworthy. I think that would be to sum up what the Ramchal is saying. When a person is studying, looks at himself, he's looking at his whole self. If he wants to look at a certain quality and say, he wants to analyze his qualities, yes, by all means, he knows that he has qualities, that's okay. But when he's summing up the whole person, and he wants to know if he's praiseworthy, so he's not allowed to ignore his deficiencies. So he's going to see his whole being and realize that since he's not perfect and he has deficiencies, he has that on the table also. So that's not ignored. But when a person is looking at somebody else, he doesn't have responsibility to look at the whole person. I want to look at only at the qualities, and I see a quality, and that quality is praiseworthy. Not that the whole person is praiseworthy, but that's not my business. I don't have to study the whole person.
The question is why is that? Why is it like that?
It's still difficult. Is it still difficult that if a person on his own, if he wants to study only a certain quality that he has, he may. But when he comes to the summation, am I praiseworthy? So he wouldn't be allowed to ignore his deficiencies because he's himself.
No, but why other people? I mean,
I may
logically I can, but just Why by other people do we not look at their deficiencies?
We may, but there's no purpose in doing that. Why should I have to see other people's deficiencies? Right. I want to study the qualities.
No purpose.
There's no purpose.
Nothing can be achieved.
And right, and I have no obligation to study their deficiencies. So I may only look at their qualities and study them and say that that's a praiseworthy quality. I'm not saying the whole person is praiseworthy as a whole. I don't have to judge the whole person.
Except like for
yes.
Or like a business partner.
Yeah, surely. Then over there you are going to study the deficiencies, and you have to make a decision with all the qualities. And if a person goes to a shidduch and thinks that everything is quality, so he should know that he's not seeing clearly. He should know that he's blinded. He should realize that he has to ask somebody to help him to find out the deficiencies. After he finds out all of the qualities and deficiencies, now he has to make a decision, is it appropriate? But when a person is studying himself, so then he always is going to be studying his whole being. And even by himself also, I would agree that I would think that Ramchal would say that if a person wants to study a certain aspect that he has to see if it's a quality, what he has, he may. So I'm not saying a person can't say that he has a quality that is praiseworthy, but on the person, now he's saying about the whole person, am I as a person praiseworthy? So then he by definition, he's going to have to define the whole person, and therefore he has over there also deficiencies by somebody else. There never comes a time.
I think he goes even further than that. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves because I happen to have read it,
right.
Chapter, but he says, even if you're a great Torah sage, you have no reason to be proud of your knowledge because anybody else with that intellectual ability would have accomplished the same thing. Now, I'm not sure about that because you also had to put effort in it,
Right. So
capacities.
So we'll get there as we go on. It's true that he has many points in this chapter. This is just the first point that he says is that as you're saying that he's going to be reasons that even the qualities also not always. Sometimes a person attributes to himself more credit than he deserves even for his qualities. That's true. But now the first point he's saying is, I think, in a chiddush in its own. Before he gets to the other points, there are going to be about 4 points that he's going to be in this chapter, why a person should be humble. But the first one seems to be saying the fact that a person has deficiencies that dampens his qualities and he's not praiseworthy because of the deficiencies, even if his qualities would be perfect. But he has also deficiencies, and the deficiencies dampen his wholesomeness of perfection, and therefore he's not considered praiseworthy as a whole. There's another sefer that the Ramchal wrote. I think it was his first sefer when he was 17 years old. It's not so famous. It's called Lashon Limudim, and over there it's mostly not even a Torah sefer. It's a sefer of how to speak eloquently in public, how to make a speech, how to make it interesting, and he has all the klolim over there of speaking and how to analyze a subject in a way that you should be able to say a drasha about it. That's the subject of Lashon Limudim. They have it in print, but it's not so famous. Over there, he wants to take an example to be able to say how you could analyze a subject, break it down to all its parts, and then how to make it interesting for people when you're going to deliver your speech. And he uses humility as a subject. Very nice find that they pointed out that when Ramchal speaks about humility over there, he takes the subject and breaks it down logically to all its parts, and then to be able to build it up again, how to present it in an interesting way to impress people with the ideas that you want to get across. A person thinks that he should be humble because he doesn't have any qualities. He says it's not true. You have qualities. The chiddush of humility is that even though he has qualities, but since I have deficiencies which I can't ignore, so I don't look at myself as perfect, and therefore I don't consider myself praiseworthy. Yeah. I wouldn't want a speech to be said about myself with all my qualities and all my deficiencies.
I thought it was appreciating how good a person really is, but knowing how far he is away from achieving his real potential. So, and even if he wouldn't be, there's a chiddush also that even if it would be past his potential, but he's not perfect. He is deficient, even if he say that it's not within his reach. But it's also be included that a person is deficient. He's going to go later on and say that a person, by being human, is also very deficient. So a person, when he looks at his human state, he doesn't consider himself praiseworthy because he has deficiencies. He doesn't ignore his deficiencies. Over there he says 3 categories. He says a tzanua, an anav, and a chassid. 3 people who are not going to consider themselves praiseworthy, each one for a different reason. There would be a person who doesn't think he has any qualities. He calls him a tzanua, but for our purposes doesn't make a difference what the name is. But he says that a person who doesn't ask for praise, he doesn't consider himself praiseworthy because he doesn't think that he has qualities that are praiseworthy. The qualities themselves are not praiseworthy.
Not because of the chesron, not because of the deficiencies. He doesn't think that he has praiseworthy qualities, like we said a second ago, that he doesn't think that he has qualities. That's one person. A chassid, it might be somebody, whatever the name is going to be, a person who doesn't want to take credit or praise for his qualities, not because deficiencies are dampening them, because he doesn't want to take credit, whatever reason he has. He wants to stay away from the limelight, whatever it might be. He wants to be a porush, he wants to be abstain, whatever the issue might be. He wants to stay away from praise that he really deserves, but he thinks that he really deserves it. The anav is going to be a person who realizes that even though he has qualities, he doesn't deserve praise because of his deficiencies. That's this lumdus that he's saying over here. A person who comes to this understanding that only perfection is fitting for praise, and even though he has qualities, but since he has deficiencies, he's not praiseworthy.
Does he ever say anywhere that only perfection is fitting for praise, or is that the Rav's words?
I think it's only perfection is praiseworthy. He doesn't say those words the way I'm saying it, but I think that's what's deduced from this sentence. He says that even if he has many qualities, since he has some deficiencies, so he's not praiseworthy. I think that's the point. There's another sefer, not the Ramchal, that says it a little different. It comes out the same thing, but the Ramchal is talking more from a logical point of view, that the person doesn't consider himself praiseworthy since he has deficiencies. The other sefer, I think maybe is more in the pasuk. I forgot the name of the sefer. I think the Zera Emes. It appears on the Chafetz Chaim, on the Hilchos Lashon Hara. Over there he says that when a person sees himself in relation to Hashem, Hashem is perfection. When a person sees himself in relation to Hashem, even though he might think that he has a lot of qualities, but when he's comparing himself, that's only when he's comparing himself to his neighbor. But if he can stay comparing himself to Hashem, then he doesn't feel like anything, because he knows that Hashem is infinite perfection, that he doesn't even get, there's nothing to talk about, there's no comparison at all. So like the pasuk says, a person talks about that your heart is going to become exalted, and you're going to forget Hashem. These two things go together. When a person feels exalted, he feels praiseworthy, it's only because he forgot about Hashem. It's like a person, let's say the first grader, and he's the best in his class in math. He does faster examples than anybody else. So he feels like he's has what to feel praiseworthy about. But then the professor is standing next to him, so then he feels like a nobody. If he realizes that the professor knows so much more than him. But sometimes he's such a big Balgaiva that he doesn't even think that the professor knows more than him. But if he'd have enough seichel to know how many hundreds and thousands of times more the professor is than the first grader, so then he wouldn't feel arrogant even in relation to his classmates, because I can't forget the fact that the professor is standing right here. If the professor would walk out and it's only me and my classmates, so then I can feel arrogant. But if the professor is standing next to me, so then who am I? When a person wants to feel arrogant, even in relation to his neighbors, to his fellow man, he only can do that if he forgets about Hashem. But if he forgets about Hashem, he has to ignore Hashem temporarily, and then he could be arrogant, I'm better than you. But when a person realizes that Hashem is there, in his presence, and he doesn't forget about him, so then he can't feel overbearing to his fellow men, because he's comparing himself to Hashem at the same time. That is, in other words, it comes out, seems to be the same as the Ramchal, but the Ramchal doesn't say these words, that he's comparing himself to Hashem. He just says that he's comparing himself to perfection, and the fact that he has deficiencies, the deficiencies dampen his qualities, and therefore he doesn't consider himself praiseworthy. I do forget, if you want this exact quote, that praiseworthiness is only fitting for perfection, he might say it in the other sefer that I was referring to, in Lashon Limudim. I'll try to check it up during the week and come back next week to see if he does say such a sentence.
No, your reasoning is fine.
But it seems to be deduced from the sentence that he says it over here.
Later on, he does mention that if a person were to compare himself with Hashem.
He does say it later on? I don't recall. So okay, so as we go on, we'll see more. Okay, so we're just starting the subject. This was the first point that he said, that the fact that a person has deficiencies, even though he realizes his qualities, he doesn't consider himself praiseworthy, because those deficiencies dampen his perfection, and therefore he doesn't consider himself praiseworthy.
Let me say something regarding this. If a person's aware of his errors and mistakes, then when someone else makes a mistake and you're aware of how big your mistakes were, then that makes it, you're not so eager to criticize, because you remember how big the mistakes were, and this is minor.
You're able to tolerate other people's mistakes if you realize your own mistakes,
which are much, much bigger.
Even much bigger. Yashikah.
Yeah.